$300,000 for one night. Those were the words that changed everything. The words that made my world tilt sideways and crash into something I could never unsee. But before that night, before I heard him say those disgusting words, I was just Claire Morgan, 25 years old, barely making ends meet, drowning in student loan debt, and trying to piece together some version of a future that didn't feel like a dead end. I thought I had time. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, things would fall into place. I was wrong. I'm 33 now, married, 2 kids. A life far from the version of myself that stood in that hallway, clutching a towel around me like it was the only thing holding me together. But I remember it all. Every second. Every word. The way my stomach twisted. The way the air in the room felt too thick to breathe. I remember the way my stepfather, Mark, looked at me when he said it. That awful mix of confidence and desperation. Like he had rehearsed it. Like he thought, for even a second, I would consider it. I didn't. But I didn't know that yet. Back then, I was just trying to survive. I'd graduated with honors, but that didn't mean much when you were stuck teaching at a small community college, barely scraping by. I had rent, bills, and loans that felt like they would crush me before I ever had the chance to live. And my mother? She was never much of a safety net. She had remarried when I was 20. Mark was wealthy, older, and gave her the kind of lifestyle she had always wanted. She adored him, or at least pretended to. I never liked him. Not really. But I tolerated him because she did. Because it was easier that way. That's how I ended up back at their house that weekend. I didn't visit often, but with money being tight, I figured a couple of days there would save me on groceries. Maybe even give me and my mom a chance to talk. It had been years since we had a real conversation. Ever since my dad left, disappeared, she had been distant. And after my twin sister, Lily, died when we were kids, things between us had never really recovered. I wanted to believe that maybe we could fix things. I was wrong. That afternoon, I went for a jog. It was one of those brutally hot days, the kind where the heat clings to your skin like a second layer. By the time I got back, I was drenched in sweat, the muscles in my legs aching. The house was quiet. I saw a note on the counter. Mom's out with a friend. Mark went grocery shopping. Perfect. I thought I had the place to myself. I didn't even bother grabbing clothes before heading to the shower. Why would I? No one was supposed to be back for hours. The hot water was a relief, washing away the sticky humidity, and for a few minutes, I let myself relax. I should have been paying attention. I wrapped a towel around myself, stepping into the hallway, my mind already on the cold glass of water I was going to grab from the kitchen. And that's when I saw him, Mark, standing at the end of the hallway, watching me. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. That maybe he had just gotten home and hadn't expected me to walk out like this. Then he smiled. Not a friendly, stepfather kind of smile. Something else entirely. And before I could say anything, he stepped closer. Too close. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked in place. My brain screamed at me to move, but my feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. You're beautiful, you know that? His voice was low, testing the waters. I swallowed hard, gripping the towel tighter around me. Mark, what are you? $300,000 for one night, he said. Like it was a business deal. Like this was something normal. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. What the hell did he just say? $300,000 for one night. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. That my brain, still foggy from the heat of the shower, had twisted his words into something impossible, something that didn't make sense. But the way he looked at me, the way his lips curled into that knowing smirk, he meant it. Every single disgusting word. I took a step back, gripping the towel tighter, my fingers pressing into the damp fabric so hard they ached. What the hell did you just say? My voice barely sounded like my own. Shaky. Strained. Mark didn't flinch. If anything, he looked amused. You heard me. His voice was calm, casual, like this was just a friendly offer over morning coffee. Think about it, Claire. $300,000. That's life-changing money. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind was racing, but I couldn't form a single coherent thought. He actually thought I would consider this. That I would be desperate enough to say yes. My stomach twisted violently. Are you insane? My voice cracked as I stumbled back another step. His expression didn't change. Relax, he said smoothly, like I was the one being unreasonable. I'm just making an offer. You don't have to make such a big deal out of it. A big deal. My stepfather had just tried to buy me, and he had the audacity to tell me not to make a big deal out of it. My entire body was shaking now, my breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. I needed to get out of there. Away from him. I turned and ran. Straight into my room, slamming the door shut behind me, my hands shaking as I locked it. For a second, I just stood there, pressing my back against the door, trying to steady my breathing. But no matter how many deep breaths I took, I couldn't stop the way my hands trembled, the way my stomach churned like I was going to be sick. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But when I opened them again, I was still here. Still trapped in this house. Still gripping a damp towel like it was some kind of shield. Through the thin walls, I could hear the distant hum of the TV. Mark had made himself comfortable in the living room, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just completely shattered the last remaining illusion I had about him. What was I supposed to do? Call my mom? I let out a bitter laugh, the sound choked and hollow. She wouldn't believe me. She never believed me. Not about anything important. And this? She'd twist it. Find a way to blame me. Just like she always did. I could already hear her voice in my head. Claire, you must have misunderstood. You're overreacting. Why would Mark say something like that? Because he did. Because he was a disgusting, manipulative bastard who thought he could get away with it. And the worst part? He probably would. Tears burned at the edges of my vision, but I forced them back, clenching my jaw so hard it ached. I wouldn't cry. Not over this. Not over him. I sat down on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, my mind spinning through every possible option, every possible way out of this mess. But no matter how I looked at it, I kept running into the same wall. I had nowhere to go. I had no one to call. I was alone in this. And that thought terrified me more than anything. Minutes dragged by, stretching out endlessly as I sat there in silence. Then, finally, the sound of the front door opening broke through the haze in my mind. My mom's voice carried down the hallway, light, casual, like it was just another normal evening. For a brief second, relief washed over me. She was home. But almost immediately, another wave of dread followed. What was I supposed to say? Would she even listen? I wiped my damp hands on the towel, forcing myself to stand. My legs felt shaky, unsteady, but I ignored it, reaching for the doorknob with fingers that still trembled. I stepped into the hallway. There she was, setting her purse down on the counter, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband had just tried to buy me like I was something he could own. Mark was still on the couch, one arm draped over the backrest, his expression perfectly neutral. My stomach churned at how calm he looked. He already knew how this would play out. He already knew she wouldn't believe me. And that's what made me the angriest of all. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay steady. Mom, I need to talk to you. Alone. She glanced up at me, frowning slightly. What is it? I flicked my gaze toward Mark, who was watching us like this was some kind of show. My skin crawled. Can we just talk in private? She sighed but followed me into the kitchen, arms crossed over her chest like she was already preparing to be annoyed. I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to find the right words. But there weren't any right words for this. Mom, I started, my voice cracking. Mark said something to me. Something disgusting. Her expression shifted, but not in the way I hoped. Instead of concern, there was something else. Annoyance. "What are you talking about?" she asked sharply. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to step off a cliff. "He offered me money." My voice was barely above a whisper. $300,000 to sleep with him. The words felt like acid coming out of my mouth. I expected shock, anger, something, but what I got instead made my stomach drop. She laughed. A short, bitter sound that cut through me like a blade. "Oh, for God's sake, Claire. Don't be ridiculous." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "I'm not lying," I said, my voice rising. He said it. Just now. In the hallway. But she was already shaking her head. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, rubbing her temple like I was giving her a headache. Always looking for attention. Always trying to cause problems. The room spun around me. She didn't believe me. Of course, she didn't. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my pulse hammering in my ears. "I'm not lying," I repeated, louder this time, desperate for her to hear me. She raised a hand to stop me, her expression cold and detached. "Enough, Claire." Then, she did exactly what I had feared the most. She turned to Mark. "Let's see what you have to say about this." She stormed back into the living room. And I followed, my heart pounding, knowing exactly how this was going to go. Mark looked up as we entered, his expression perfectly composed. "Mark," my mother snapped. "Claire is claiming that you said something completely inappropriate to her." She hesitated, casting me a sharp glare before finishing. "She says you offered her money, $300,000. Mark leaned back slightly, his face shifting into one of exaggerated concern. "Julia, I don't know how to say this, but it's actually the opposite of what she's claiming." My blood ran cold. "She came out of the bathroom in just a towel," he continued smoothly. "And it felt like she was trying to get my attention." Then he looked at me. And he smirked. I felt like I was drowning. The walls of the house, the walls of my childhood, felt like they were closing in, suffocating me. I had always known that my mother and I were never close. That she saw me as an inconvenience, a shadow of the daughter she wished she still had. But this was something else. I stood there, frozen, as Mark spun his disgusting lie like it was the truth. Like he was some poor victim caught in my scheming. "She came out of the bathroom in just a towel," he repeated smoothly, his voice laced with something that made my skin crawl. "And, Julia, I hate to say this, but it felt like she was trying to get my attention." My stomach lurched. I couldn't breathe. The sheer audacity of him, made my blood turn to ice. I forced myself to look at my mother, praying, hoping, begging that she wouldn't believe him. That she would, just this once, see me. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her jaw clenched. Not at him. At me. "I knew it," she muttered, shaking her head like I was some delinquent child who had just gotten caught in a lie. I could feel the breath leave my lungs. "What?" My voice cracked, raw and disbelieving. She turned to face me fully, her eyes flashing with anger at me. "You always do this, Claire," she spat. "You always try to turn people against each other. You can't stand when someone is happy, so you start making up stories to get attention." I took a shaky step back. It felt like she had slapped me. Mark sat there, calm, composed, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes as he watched it all unfold exactly the way he had planned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her, make her listen. But I knew better. She was never going to listen. Not when it was me against him. Not when it was her daughter against the man she had built her entire life around. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "Mom, please," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "Just think about this for a second. Why would I make something like this up?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Why?" "Oh, I don't know, Claire. Maybe because you love playing the victim." My heart hammered against my ribs. Victim? Victim? I stared at her, horrified. You really think I would make this up? She didn't even hesitate. Yes, that was it. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to say. I felt something inside me break. A piece of me that had been holding on, just barely, finally let go. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream or collapse right there on the floor. Instead, I laughed. A short, bitter, broken sound. Because of course. Of course. I should have known. My mother had always chosen men over me. She had always believed their version of things, no matter how much it hurt me. Why did I ever think this time would be different? Mark sighed dramatically, rubbing a hand over his face like this was all exhausting for him. Julia, he said softly, playing his role to perfection, I really didn't want to bring this up, but Claire's been struggling financially, hasn't she? My entire body went rigid. No. She's drowning in debt, he continued. Her job barely pays enough for rent. Maybe she thought she could. I don't know. Manipulate me into helping her out? And when I didn't react the way she wanted, she turned this into some kind of attack. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was making me sound like a desperate, pathetic liar. And the worst part? My mother was eating it up. She turned back to me, her expression sharp, calculating. Is that what this is? She demanded. Are you trying to blackmail him for money? I let out a harsh, bitter breath. You can't be serious. I am serious, she snapped. I should have known this is what you were up to. You never take responsibility for anything, Claire. It's always someone else's fault, isn't it? My chest ached. This wasn't just her not believing me. This was her actively choosing him. Again, like she had always done. I felt sick. I shook my head, taking another step back. You know what? I said, my voice eerily calm. Forget it. She narrowed her eyes. Forget what? All of it, I whispered. You. Him. This whole conversation. I turned on my heel, walking straight toward the front door. My hands trembled as I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I could feel my mother's glare burning into my back. What do you think you're doing? I ignored her, yanking the door open. She scoffed. Oh, that's rich. Running away again, Claire? Just like you always do. I paused. My grip on the doorknob tightened. Then, slowly, I turned around. I met her gaze head-on, letting her see everything I felt, every ounce of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Yeah, I said. I am. Then I stepped outside. And I slammed the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for a while, my vision blurred with unshed tears. I shouldn't have been surprised. I shouldn't have let it hurt me. But it did. It did because, for some stupid, naive reason, I had thought my mother might love me more than she loved him. I was wrong. I gritted my teeth, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But most of all, I wanted revenge. I wasn't just going to let Mark get away with this. I wasn't going to let him sit back and smirk, knowing he had won. He thought he was safe. He thought he could twist the truth, turn my own mother against me, and walk away untouched. He was wrong. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding as I reached for my phone. There was only one person I could call. Someone who would actually believe me. Someone who wouldn't tell me I was making it up. John. He picked up on the second ring. Claire? His voice was warm, familiar, concerned. Are you okay? I swallowed the lump in my throat. No, I admitted. I'm not. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment. I need your help. John didn't ask questions. Not at first. There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear the worry in his breathing, before his voice came through the phone, steady and calm. Where are you? I blinked hard, trying to clear the blur from my eyes, and glanced around at the darkened street. I hadn't even realized where I'd stopped. Near the old library, I muttered. By Maple Street. I'll be there in 10. I exhaled shakily and dropped my phone onto the passenger seat. 10 minutes. I could survive 10 more minutes. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, my heart still hammering in my chest. The weight of everything pressed down on me all at once. My mother didn't believe me. Mark had turned it all around on me so effortlessly, like he'd done it 100 times before. Like he knew how easy it would be. And I had left that house with nothing. No proof. No justice. Just rage simmering under my skin, eating me alive. I clenched my jaw. Not for long. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let him win. A soft knock on my window made me jump. John. I hadn't even noticed his car pull up behind me. I rolled down the window, my fingers still shaking. He crouched slightly, peering inside, and the second he saw my face, his expression darkened. "Get in my car," he said, his voice low. I nodded and grabbed my bag, moving on autopilot as I stepped out and slid into the passenger seat of his car. The warmth of the heater hit me immediately, but I still felt frozen. John watched me for a second before shifting into drive and pulling away from the curb. "You gonna tell me what happened?" he asked finally, his tone softer now. I swallowed hard, staring out the window. "My stepfather," I started, but the words lodged in my throat like glass. I clenched my fists and tried again. He made me an offer." John's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What kind of offer?" I turned my head and met his gaze. My stomach twisted at the look on his face, the way his usual calmness had been replaced with something darker. 300 grand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "To sleep with him." John slammed his foot on the brakes so hard I lurched forward. "Jesus Christ, Claire." A car behind us honked, and he jerked the wheel, pulling us onto a side street. He threw the car into park, breathing hard, his hands gripping the steering wheel like he was trying to keep himself from breaking it in half. I hadn't even realized I was crying until he reached over and wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "That son of a bitch." His voice was sharp, vibrating with fury. "Tell me you got the hell out of there." I did. His nostrils flared, but he nodded, forcing himself to breathe. I wiped at my face and looked down at my lap. My mom didn't believe me. John exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Of course she didn't." That stung more than it should have. I forced out a bitter laugh. "I should have known, huh?" He didn't say anything for a moment. Just watched me, his jaw clenched tight. Then he turned fully in his seat. "What do you want to do?" I hesitated. Because I knew what I wanted to do. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. I curled my fingers into fists. "I want proof." John raised an eyebrow. "Proof?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. If I had something, anything, to prove what he said, my mom wouldn't be able to deny it. She wouldn't be able to look me in the eye and tell me I was making it up. John exhaled slowly. "You want to record him?" "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment, running a hand through his hair. Then he sighed. "All right," he said. "How do you want to do this?" A small weight lifted from my chest. Because he didn't argue. He didn't tell me to drop it, to move on, to let it go. He believed me. And that was enough. I clenched my jaw and sat up straighter. "I'll call him," I said. "I'll pretend I overreacted. Say I just needed time to think." John's mouth pressed into a thin line, but he nodded. "And you think he'll fall for that?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I do. Because Mark thought he was invincible. He thought I was weak. And that was his mistake." John set up my phone with a recording app, testing the quality before handing it back to me. "When you call him, keep him talking as long as possible," he instructed. "Make sure he repeats himself." I nodded and took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I dialed. The line rang twice before he picked up. "Claire," Mark's voice was smooth, easy. "Didn't expect to hear from you." I forced a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I just wanted to talk." "Oh!" I swallowed. "I think I overreacted." A pause. Then, "I knew you'd come around," he said, amusement dripping from his voice. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I don't know, Mark. 300,000 is a lot of money. It is. He chuckled lightly. That's why I figured you'd think it over. I mean, really, Claire, this could change your life. I shot John a look. His expression was dark, but he nodded. So, you were serious? I pressed. You meant it? Of course I meant it. Bingo. I took a slow breath. And, what exactly were you expecting from me? Mark laughed, the sound grating. Come on, Claire. You're a smart girl. My stomach turned, but I forced my voice to stay even. I just want to be clear. He exhaled, as if indulging me. One night, he said. You and me. No strings, no drama. Just fun. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I had him. I don't know, I murmured. Could we talk in person? Mark hesitated. Where? I glanced at John. He held up a piece of paper. Hotel Regent. Room 704. I repeated it into the phone, heart pounding. Mark chuckled again. You're full of surprises, Claire. I'll be there. I ended the call. John and I locked eyes. The plan was in motion. And Mark? He had no idea what was coming. The hotel room was perfect. It was just the right kind of place for someone like Mark. A sleek, high-end suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, a fully stocked bar, and a king-sized bed that screamed excess. The kind of place a man like him would take a woman he was paying for. The thought made my skin crawl. I stood in the dim lighting of the hallway, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. John was next to me, leaning against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, his jaw tight. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. I nodded. I have to be. He exhaled sharply, glancing down the hall. I don't like you being in there alone. I swallowed hard. I won't be. I tapped my phone. You'll hear everything. John clenched his fists, but didn't argue. I knew he hated this. I hated it too. But it was the only way. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it swung open. Mark was standing there, a smug smile already tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had changed into a crisp dress shirt, the top 2 buttons undone, his sleeves rolled up casually. Like he thought he had already won. I forced a nervous smile and stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. The air was thick, heavy. The tension in the room coiled around my ribs, pressing down hard. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my breathing even. Mark poured himself a drink and gestured toward the couch. Have a seat. I hesitated just long enough for him to notice, then slowly walked over and sat down, crossing my legs tightly. He took a sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of the glass. So, he said, settling into the chair across from me. I'm glad you came around. I forced a small, nervous laugh, tucking my hair behind my ear. Yeah, I guess I just panicked earlier. He smirked. Understandable. But I knew you'd think it through. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat. He thought he was so damn clever. I forced my voice to waver, just slightly. I want to make sure we're on the same page. He arched an eyebrow. Of course. I licked my lips, fidgeting with my hands. So, you were serious about the money? Mark leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping lower. Dead serious. I nodded slowly. And what exactly would you expect from me? His smile widened. You know exactly what I expect. My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. I glanced down at my hands like I was hesitating. And you wouldn't tell anyone? Mark chuckled. Claire, sweetheart. Of course not. Sweetheart. I fought the urge to recoil. I needed him to say it outright. To give me something my mother couldn't deny. I shifted slightly, pretending to be nervous. I don't know, Mark. It's a big decision. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before sliding it toward me. I glanced down. A banking app. The screen showed a pending transfer. $300,000. The nausea hit me so fast I thought I might actually be sick. He had been so sure I would agree that he had already set up the payment. I forced my fingers to stay steady as I picked up the phone, staring at the screen like I was considering it. Then I took a deep breath and lifted my gaze to meet his. You really think I'd sleep with you for money? Mark's expression flickered, just for a second. Then he smirked again. That's exactly what I think. I pressed the button on my phone. The recording stopped. The change in my expression must have been immediate because Mark's smirk faltered. Slowly, I stood up. Thanks, Mark, I said coldly. That's all I needed. His brow furrowed. What? I held up my phone, letting the reality settle in. I recorded everything. His face went pale. I took a step back toward the door. And just so you know, John's waiting outside. He heard everything, too. Mark shot up from his chair. You. I yanked the door open. John was standing there, arms crossed, his expression dark. Mark stopped dead in his tracks. For the first time, he looked scared. I smiled. Game over. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face had gone from pale to deep red, his hands clenching at his sides. You bitch, he spat. I shrugged. Call me whatever you want, Mark. But I have you. And when I show this to my mom, you're done. Mark's jaw twitched. He was calculating, trying to figure a way out. But there wasn't one. I turned to John. Let's go. John didn't hesitate. He put a hand on my back and steered me down the hall. We didn't look back. I played the recording for my mother the next morning. She didn't want to listen at first. She kept shaking her head, muttering under her breath, trying to convince herself I was still lying. Then she heard his voice. She heard the way he spoke to me, the way he admitted it so casually, and the look on her face when it sank in. I would never forget it. Her hands shook. Her breath hitched. And then, for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Because she knew. She had chosen the wrong person to believe. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find words. I didn't give her the chance. You don't get to apologize, I said flatly. You don't get to fix this. She swallowed hard. Claire, No, I stood up, gripping my phone. You chose not to believe me. You let him make me the villain. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't care, I cut her off. You can deal with this on your own. Then I turned and walked out the door. For the last time. I never went back to that house. Not once. After that morning, after watching my mother crumble under the weight of her own denial, I walked away and never looked back. She called me that night. Twice. Then again the next day. I didn't answer. Because I had nothing left to say. She had made her choice. She had chosen to protect the man who saw me as nothing more than a transaction. And now, she would have to live with that. I wasn't going to be the one to save her. Mark was gone by the end of the week. John and I had agreed not to release the recording publicly, not unless we had to, but that didn't mean I couldn't use it. I sent my mother a single text. Get rid of him, or I will. That was all it took. By the time I checked, Mark had packed his things and disappeared. I didn't know where he went. I didn't care. I just knew he was out of my life. Forever. It took a long time to heal. Longer than I expected. For weeks, I felt like I was still in that house. Like I could still hear my mother's voice, still feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on my chest. But John was there. Every step of the way. He never pushed me to talk, never asked me to move on before I was ready. He just stayed. And that was enough. One night, about a month after everything, I sat on his couch, staring at the steam rising from my cup of tea. I don't know who I am without them, I admitted quietly. John sat beside me, his arm resting on the back of the couch, close but not touching. "That's not true," he said. "You've always been you, Claire. You're just free now." Free. The word felt foreign in my mouth. I had never felt free before. Not with my mother. Not with the weight of my past clinging to me like a chain I couldn't break. But now, for the first time, I saw a future that didn't include them. A future that was mine. I started therapy. At first, I hated it. I hated sitting in a room with someone who wanted to dissect every scar I had spent years covering up. I hated the way she looked at me, like I was something delicate, something breakable. I wasn't. I had survived. But over time, it got easier. I started talking. Really talking. About my mother. About Lily. About the way I had spent my whole life trying to be someone she could love, someone she could be proud of, and how it had never been enough. And one day, my therapist looked at me and said something that changed everything. "It wasn't your job to make her love you." I stared at her, my throat tightening. Because deep down, I had always believed it was. That if I had just been better, smarter, more, she would have chosen me. But she hadn't. And she never would have. Because the problem had never been me. Years passed. I built a life. A real one. I left my job at the community college and found something better. Something that made me feel like I was actually moving forward instead of treading water. I traveled. I laughed more. And slowly, piece by piece, I let myself trust again. John and I got married when I was 30. It wasn't a grand wedding. There were no family members in the front row, no forced smiles for people I barely knew. Just us. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a home. A real one. One that wasn't built on secrets and silence, and the kind of love that only existed when it was convenient. My mother reached out a few times over the years. I never responded. I never blocked her either. Maybe a part of me wanted to see if she would change. But she never did. Her messages were always the same. "Claire, please call me. I miss you. We should talk." She never once said she was sorry. And that told me everything I needed to know. I had spent too many years waiting for her to be someone she would never be. I wasn't going to waste another second. Now, when I look at my life, I don't see her in it. And that doesn't hurt anymore. I have a husband who loves me without conditions. 2 kids who will never have to question if they're enough. A home filled with laughter, with warmth, with a kind of love I never thought I would have. I used to think I needed my mother. That I needed her approval, her love, her acceptance. I don't. Because I am enough. I always was. And I always will be.